Hello there, English 215 students. This is your professor. My name is Dr. Martin. I'll be teaching this online course for you. And I wanted to record a welcome video and to let you know a little bit about this week's reading and the overall direction of the course. Sometimes an oral recording or narrative is better than a written one. So welcome. The course is designed. It's a 16-week class that's been set up for you. Usually online courses are 8 weeks, but ours is 16. So it will be like a regular course over the week. We have no required meetings. I do have several readings that we'll be doing. Most of them are online. In fact, if you can't afford your books right now but can get them later in the semester, that's perfectly fine, though the bookstore may not have them. The readings we'll be doing at the end of the term are print ones that are also available that you could buy. You have to pay for these via an ebook or Kindle edition. This one's Charles Fraser's Nightwoods. He did the novel Cold Mountain several years ago, which was made into a feature film. It's longer. I would say it's close to, well, it's about 250 pages. It's not terribly long. That's the only long work we're reading this semester. You also have Degrees of Elevation. These are contemporary stories from Appalachia. So these are excellent books. Again, you could buy them electronically, but you definitely will have to purchase them this semester. This week, I gave you the Appalachian Regional Commission map of Appalachia. I'd recommend you take a look at that before doing your introductory post. Interested to see whether you have any family connections there. Basically, this is a course that studies a geographic region, Appalachia, and the literary and cultural productions from that region. If you think of something like African American lit, we would study literature written by Black Americans across any state, as long as the race is the same, or it was about Black experience, right? But for us, the marker that's going to be the connecting thread is literature in and about what we consider the Appalachian Mountains, usually from the 1700s to the contemporary time, though with an emphasis on modern works and some in the 19th century. So the mountain, the landscape, the topography is what will be the uniting thread between the works for this class. I do have office hours. You can see my virtual office hours on Moodle, so you can meet with me if you'd like to for a live conference. And the course has a major assignment every couple of weeks. I said 3 weeks in my introductory email, but sometimes it's a little less, sometimes it's a little more than 3 weeks. I try to mix it up as much as I can and have, like, there's a recording you'll be doing of yourself later semester. I think you're going to enjoy the readings. I hope you can make connections between Louisiana and the Deep South and the Acadian culture here, maybe, and that of Appalachia. And again, in my introductory post, I ask you to maybe ask your parents or your grandparents whether you have any family connections with the region. I'm also interested whether you've been to the region, right? Whether you've been to the mountains. They're beautiful, just as the bayou here in Thibodaux and Homa is quite beautiful as well. So let me tell you a little bit about the book you're reading this to start off class. There is no opening, like, foundational text to Appalachia like there is for British literature. I'm teaching Beowulf this week as a foundational text in that class. This is one that I would say is a foundational text for Appalachia. William Byrd was a rich Virginia gentleman who was going over the dividing line that separated North and South, Virginia and North Carolina. And he was going over with a bunch of surveyors from North Carolina and from Virginia. They're trying to figure out which line is part of which state. The reason I assigned it is it's nonfiction, first-person writing on the Appalachian region. They're not self-consciously Appalachian. They don't use dialect and all those particular things. But the portrayal he has is some of the first ones we get of the mountain region in American literature. He describes going by the River Dan, the Hyco River, I think a couple more rivers, and he's basically showing what the mountains look like to the west. And it's some of our first literary recreations of the Appalachian Mountains. Where he is in the section I gave you, and it's only a couple pages, should be very manageable reading, is in Danville, or around the River Dan of South Central Virginia. And he is basically, as I said, surveying and mapping it, but looking at the mountains there. I note the use of thickets. Part of my question for this week in the reader response references topography, landscape, that sort of thing. He mentions venison, eating deer meat. He also mentions bear. So in a sense, you're also already getting a sense for what Appalachian region is. It's wild. It's a place beyond, the eastern settlements in the 18th century American imagination. It's this kind of this landscape that's out there. And the reading next week, Henry Colton, will make it even more kind of like a paradise or a beautiful untapped region in several respects. So you've got a lot going on with Byrd. It's naturalist. He references the Native Americans in ways that you and I wouldn't, because it's not very, very culturally decent the way he portrays them. But I think you'll enjoy the reading. It's very short. The thing I wanted to mention to you, I'm looking at my bookshelf as I'm talking to you because I just saw it. It's a book I was trying to get to you. So I'm thinking of James Dickey's Deliverance. Hang on. So this is a kind of a foundational text in 20th century Appalachian literature. I should probably mention I was born in Virginia. I grew up in the mountains there. I moved here from the West Virginia mountains about 3.5 years ago. So I do identify with the region, but I don't pretend to be a spokesperson for it. I do consider yourself a spokesperson for the Bayou or wherever you're from. But I did live in the mountains. I still have family in the Virginia mountains, and so it's a region I've hiked a decent amount and been around, grew up around. Though I've also lived in other places like New Jersey and Mobile and here. So anyway, the point about this book is this. In it, it's about a bunch of Atlanta, they're not businessmen, but they're kind of white-collar men who go into the Georgia mountains for hiking. It's, as I said, in the 20th century. And they go canoeing, right? They're going to whitewater rafting, I should say. And in it, they meet what you and I don't think this way, would be considered rednecks, southern rednecks. And they are, one of the men is actually raped by a fellow man in the wild. The idea would be conceptions of Appalachia are often based upon incredibly ignorant stereotypes about the region, right? And so this, unfortunately, had a decent amount of cultural resonance, and this is a stereotype of the region I think that still persists, that you're going to go get attacked by rednecks if you go into the backwoods. Again, not that I think redneck is an okay term to use. I think it's derogatory. But the idea would be, think of the cultural stereotypes about the region. And you could put this into cultural stereotypes about the South, about Louisiana, about the Bayou region, and all of that. And the idea would be how those stereotypes still resonate and how they have cultural markers, like James Dickey's novel, which was made into a film with Burt Reynolds, by the way, Deliverance. But most of the readings you'll find as you get closer to 20th century, I think will resonate. Many of the characters are working class. They're trying to get by. A lot of them work in industries, coal, that kind of thing. And if you know anything about the contemporary Appalachia, you might know that it's going through a difficult time transitioning out of coal. For me, as someone who's lived there and now lives here, I wonder whether the same isn't happening with oil and gas here, whether there's not a difficult economic transition away from that. Extractive industries, what's going to be the next economic force for the region. But modern day Appalachia is in that challenging middle ground where what's the next industry? What will people use for jobs? Maybe it's technical or technological, like as in Pittsburgh. The readings. You have early readings that will hopefully create a narrative. You've got William Byrd this week, Henry Colton later. You'll get Life in the Iron Mills by Rebecca Harding Davis shortly thereafter. The Blackwater Chronicle, which is a kind of male camaraderie tale traveling in the mountains. A lot of the first couple weeks will be nonfiction. They're valued for their history as much as for their literary devices. So again, it provides a window into the region that is unparalleled. Hopefully, the reading responses and the discussions stimulate you. I'll try to keep an even-handed pace, but do expect to read a couple hours each week, and you should do fine in my course. This introduction, I hope, is helpful, and I wish you well in Appalachian literature.